that we haven't seen before. And this really does provide a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for us all. You know, I believe we live in this age of disruption. Technology is changing faster than ever. The demographics of the workforce, we're going to have 5 demographics, 5 generations of people in our environment, in our workforce by the year 2020. The competition for talent, governmental regulations, healthcare costs, the economies. We live in this age of disruption, and it's impacting our business. And one of the disruptors that has just gotten a lot of press, you might have all seen this about 10 days ago when Forbes magazine published this article, Amazon's wholesale slaughter. Jeff Bezos' $8 trillion business-to-business bet. In 2 days, that one article had 155,000 views. To put that into perspective, the author, the average article she had written over the last 6 months had just 9,000 views. So in 2 days, there was a 1,200% increase in readership. So Amazon's wholesale slaughter. Now, if you take a look at some of the talk that's going on in the industry about this, you hear things like Amazon's foray into industrial supplies as a wholesale slaughter is overstated. Another person is writing in this industry that this doesn't need to be a big deal for most companies if they're well run. Another says that the $8 trillion figure is wrong. It's closer to $5 trillion. Another says let's not use the word disintermediation. Guys, I'm not an alarmist, but I'm alarmed. I'm alarmed when we read in industry publications comments like we see on the left-hand side, in this case about one of the disruptions, Amazon supply. I'm alarmed because talk like this, I think, drives complacency. It drives a thinking of, hey, don't worry, everything's going to be all right. In reality, what I think we should be saying is we need to compete smarter and not harder. And that's why I'm so excited to have Bill Poutzis with us, because Bill is not going to tell us that everything's going to be okay. Bill does a whole ton of research like me and knows that we are living in this age of disruption. And now is the time to compete smarter and not harder. So let me tell you a little bit about Bill Poutzis. Bill is a professor of marketing and economics strategy at UNC, Keenan Flagler Business School. I've had the opportunity to work with Bill down there in his programs with some of our clients, and his clients is a list of who's who's. Boeing, John Deere, Barclays, Kodak, Heinz, Baker Hughes, and a whole bunch of others. And Bill is here to share with us his insight, like he did on the stage at Unleashed 18 months ago, relative to how we, in this age of disruption, can compete smarter, not harder. So Bill, to start it off, welcome. Thank you for being here. I think your book is timely. I've read it from cover to cover. I encourage everybody to get it. Bill, welcome. We're looking forward to this time together.
Thanks, Dirk. I'm excited to be part of this. I'm excited to talk to all of you. And I want, if you don't mind, I'm going to pick up on something you just said about you find it scaring, and the words that you use, that disruption isn't happening. I've heard the last few days in another industry, and my response to that at that point was that every company, every organization, every business on the history of the planet that's ever been disrupted have used almost those same exact words. So it is scary.
Yeah, no doubt about it, Bill. And I say I'm not an alarmist, but I'm alarmed by some of that. And so let's really drill into this. You know, one of the things I know that I took from your book, Compete Smarter, Not Harder, was this thought process, and it ties into what we're talking about right now. You say in the book, today, more than ever, companies, members of ASA, we need to make choices. And I believe that down to my core, that our future as a business is going to be dependent upon the decisions we make as leaders. And you say that we need to make choices about allocating the scarce resources we all have, and that we not only must decide what part of the market we should compete in, but also decisions about adopting the right tactics for the market in which they're competing. Can you just share with us some of your insights around this, the need to make right choices now maybe more than ever?
Yeah, so Dirk, let me just throw out a number, and it's one that always has stuck with me to give you some sense about how important it is to act with speed today, and how you can't wait, especially with the presence of a company as big and as daunting and as powerful as Amazon. But in the telecommunications area, for example, BlackBerry, just think of this.
Yeah.
BlackBerry just 5 years ago, had a larger market share in smartphones than Apple and Samsung combined. In just 5 years, they're less than 2% of the market, and the only thing that's keeping them in business is they get IP revenue from their patents, essentially. That's how quickly things change today. And so the premise of the book is based on a lot of work that I do with companies, many of them, if not most of them, in the B2B space, and a lot of them in the distribution area, both small and large. And what I found is that I see companies working hard. You see people working 24/7, people spending their life savings, devoting the family business to working as hard as they possibly can to be a success. And at the end of the day, unless they step back and think carefully about the choices they make as to which parts of the market they're competing in and for which customers they're focusing in on, that all that work is really for nothing. They stand no chance of succeeding until or unless they decide what part of the market to focus in on and make those choices smarter and appropriately. So I talk, for example, about a process that starts at looking at the big market. That is, if we examine the entire market, including things like disruptive technologies, and think about where the market is evolving to, build on that and start to think about how big is the market and start to map out what I write about in the book as the value chain and what I refer to as points of strategic control. That is, what part of the value chain are most important for us to compete in, and then deciding on focusing on that part of the market in terms of spending our time, energy, and other, including financial resources. Once we do that, then if we make the right choices, we can start to focus on the right set of customers, which we can talk about in more detail.
Bill, I think this is so cool, so high. You know, one of the things that I see and that I've learned is that, you know, one of the challenges we have in our business with everything that's coming at us, right, is that we get caught in the tyranny of the urgent, right? Distribution is a busy business. There's a lot of things that need to get done day in and day out. And so we get caught in the tyranny of the urgent. And I think what I hear you telling us is we need to step back. We need to step back and look at our business from a, I don't know if this is the right word, Bill, but from a more global perspective, so that we can truly understand this strategic use of the value chain, if I understand you right. Am I understanding you right there, Bill?
Yes, definitely, Dirk. And you know, one of the examples I have in the book that illustrates this is in magazine publishing and distribution, particularly from 1995 to 2001. And before I get to what's going on, what went on inside of that industry, and some of the people out there may have lived and breathed it, but if you look at the consolidation on the retail side, that is the Walmarts, the Kmarts, the CVSs of the world, the Albertsons and the supermarkets in the United States, from 1995 to 2001, some of the industry on the retail side was growing as much as 20-25% a year, including new store openings, mergers and acquisitions and the like. And if you look at the retail side, and you're sitting there in 1995 where 70% of the retail distribution of magazines in 1995 were small regional players. 6 major national distributors in 1995 controlled 10% of the market. Fast forward 7 years later, 2002, 90% of the market was controlled by just 5 players on the magazine distribution side. They call them wholesalers, but the same thing. That much consolidation should have been seen in 1995. You look at what's going on in terms of the increasing power of Walmart and others. The writing was on the wall. And by deciding in 1995 to either get bigger and gain scale or entirely shift to a new model and try and do something else for a living, as I say in the book, if you weren't doing that, I don't know what you were doing back in those days. And so the real issue today, as you enter Amazon and other major players in an environment of ubiquitous interconnected information, the real challenge is how do you play in this future environment in a way that gives you the advantages over a Walmart or a larger player. So that the information and the input has changed, the need to compete smarter, the need to make those smart choices and walk away from the tyranny of the urgent, as you Dirk appropriately said, today is all the more important because the speed changes with increased urgency.
You know, you just said something that at least made me gasp, if you don't mind, Bill. And what that was is to make those strategic decisions, you compete smarter, where you actually have advantage over the Walmarts or the Amazon supplies or the Google suppliers or whomever. Is it possible in your mind for an average family-owned, multiple location, distribution firm, maybe regional, maybe national, I don't know, but maybe one location? Is it possible for us? Go ahead.
Yeah. So Dirk, it's a great question, and one would argue maybe the most fundamental point for businesses are smaller in scale that maybe family-owned businesses to be concerned with. And that is, I talk in the book about two main things. I talk about strategic control points and what I call vertical incentive alignment. And if you try and understand what small businesses, the non large-scale national distributors that are out there, what advantages they have is quite often it's their local relationships. It's knowledge of the local markets. I look at malt beverage distributorships, Anheuser-Busch's local distributors that distribute products. Huge organization, but many of them are family-owned. I talk in the book about one I got to know a bit out in Michigan. And the advantages they have are those relationships. And what we often miss in the relationship is we stop at the relationship side. And what I often argue and talk about in some detail in the book is how you take the relationships, which can be fleeting. That is, they come and go. Sometimes cost pressures. If an Amazon of the world is able to provide quicker terms, sometimes quicker processing, perhaps a lower cost structure, how do you turn that relationship into something that makes it difficult for an Amazon or someone else to enter? And that's the concept of what the book calls, it's a fancy term called asset specificity. The term isn't important. What's important is turning it into something concrete, a joint investment that takes advantage of the relationship in a way that makes both the distribution side as well as the buying side both have an advantage, one of those win-wins. So the advantage in part is relationship. The danger is relying, I would argue, on just the relationship. Because you give a great relationship, the pressure of someone else offering better terms, better cost structure, better speed, whatever it may be, and those local relationships start to fade, start to get tension. And the real issue is how do you make it more permanent?
Yeah, I love it. And I think you answered it, Bill, but the relationship, how do you define the word relationship? Because I suspect it's different than we have traditionally defined the word relationship throughout distribution.
Yeah, it's a great question, Dirk, because I'm here. It's funny, you may see in the background, I'm at Verizon's world headquarters in New Jersey, spending the day with them talking about some of these very same issues. And we talk about relationship, and way I would define relationship is much more intimate and detailed than a business transaction. It's deep-seated empathy and understanding of what the needs are of the customer and having a personal relationship. Personal relationship doesn't have to be we go out for beers and we go on the golf course together. The personal relationship could be I sit in their office and I know their needs, what keeps them up at night, their pain points, in ways that a larger organization automated over the internet sometimes can't. So my definition of how I would define the importance of a relationship goes in a different direction than transactional. It's about knowing the pain points, about loving and having empathy for what the problems are of my own customer, which then gives me insights that a larger organization like an Amazon might not. And it also gives me the ability to leverage it in a way that I can get to points that are sustainable, investments that make it difficult for my customer to walk away, investments that we do jointly so that we have aligned interests, aligned incentives, again in a way that an Amazon, a bigger player, may not be able to.
Yeah, I love it. You know, in the whole concept of innovation that we're really thinking hard with throughout this whole world of distribution, you know, the term, the voice of the customer keeps coming up, yep. Bill, yep. And I believe, and I think you're saying, I believe that there's an opportunity for us in distribution to quote unquote get out of our offices, right? And to get out of our offices and to really spend time and devote ourselves, commit ourselves to truly understanding, observing, finding those unarticulated needs, problems, challenges, opportunities that every single one of our customers have that are being unmet by ourselves and the Amazons or whomever. And it sounds like that's how you're starting to define relationship, which I think is just so cool.
I'll do it by analogy here, and it's a product one, but it's one that we always know, and it's about getting out of the factory, out of the warehouse, out of what we do every day in the office, and actually getting into where things happen in the field. And sometimes it's associating things that never happen, where true innovation occurs. It's associating things that we don't normally think of in the day-to-day in a work situation. And one I just used this morning, story I heard recently, it was in the 1940s. A Swiss researcher was out walking his dog, and he noticed those little burrs that we hate that get stuck on our clothing or in our feet when we're at the beach or in the woods. We're stuck all over the fur and on the dog. And he said, well, what's going on? Why do they stick like that? And he put the burrs under a microscope, and he noticed thousands of little hooks inside the burr, which is what sticks to the fur of the dog. And he started to think, well, can we use that for something? And he put it to some cloth, and it stuck there, but he can pull it away if he moved it in the right direction. And what he did is he put the velour material in with these thousands of hooks, and he created what we now know as Velcro. Because there's velour and crochet, the hooks. So it's taking something, once he's out away from the factory, and starts to think about things that are, in this case, he can associate. Again, it's about as far from distribution as you can get, but the point of it is it's about taking things we don't normally see at work, going out somewhere else and observing, and just that observing sometimes is a source of innovation that we can think differently about what the needs of the customer is. There's a great saying that says before we can walk in someone else's shoes, we need to take off our own. I just love that.
Yeah, without question. I love it. Hey, and then Bill, so if we're going to develop these newly defined relationships, I'm going to guess that finding the right customer is critical to do that. And I know that you write about that in the book, Compete Smarter, Not Harder. Can you share with us your thoughts about finding the right customer? And I know you've got a story or two about Nike there as well.
Yeah, so a couple here. So what the book is about in many ways, and the way I approach this when I work with companies, and I work with, as you just mentioned, a number of larger and small organizations to narrow the scope in which we play in making those choices. So we start out broad as a big market and eventually narrow it down to the part of the market we want to compete in. But once we know that, we got to narrow it down and start to think about what customers we're serving. And the process of segmentation is just a term that's become cliched, and I think most companies don't do it well. And narrowing it down to those customers that are the right, to deliver the right revenues that fit with what we need, that we can leverage to other parts of the market, often involves what good companies have called or developed a beachhead strategy, that those first customers we get to, the important customers, that because those customers use our services, that we have as one of our flagship or main customers, others flock to us because of that. And the story you mentioned is one that I think is classic, not only because Nike has done such a good job of doing this over the years, but by contrast to another company who has done an almost even better job, but because the choice was the wrong one, it almost bankrupted them.
Interesting.
So,
Bill,
yes.
Before you tell us that, and you might define, what is a beachhead customer?
Yeah, so the beachhead customer is that flagship customer, the customer that you first attract, or perhaps if you've been in business for some time, it's when someone hears they're a customer of yours, they say, oh, you have instant credibility. Okay,
Yeah.
Tell me your terms, I'm listening now. Quite often, if we don't have those key customers that make up the what we call a beachhead, that people, when they hear that customer is crucial, they're not listening. So example I throw out is I often work with Boeing, one of my largest customers, and when they launch a new airplane, the choice of the initial launch customer is crucial. So if you're launching a new upscale plane in the, say, a 777, which is one of the flagship planes in the planet, and you launch a new version, you want to have a Singapore Air or an Emirates or one of the big, well-known, well-thought-of carriers be the first to adopt, because once the smaller airlines here, they want to emulate an Emirates. They want to emulate a Singapore Air. And so it becomes crucial sometimes to get at least one customer that gives you that instant credibility, or even if you have a set of customers out there, and many of the listeners out there know who their beachhead or flagship customers are.
Yeah.
Sometimes developing that and that choice can be the difference between success and failure.
Dirk, this is Mike. Real quick, I'd like to remind everyone if they have any questions, they could go ahead and type it. There should be a box on your screen. Feel free to type a question, and as they pop up, we'll go ahead and fire them off at Dirk.
Cool.
Sorry about the interruption, Dirk.
No, that's great, Mike. Thank you. Thanks.
Well, the minute you do it, I can see it here, too. So if there are questions, I can sort of move the conversation in directions that happen to pop up and might be useful to anyone out there.
Cool. Thanks, Bill. So was Nike an example of developing, finding the right customers and developing this beachhead strategy?
So I'll tell the short version of the long story I tell in the book. And I often call Nike as an example of a company that follows the Willie Sutton rule. And for those of you many out there know the Willie Sutton story, but there was an old bank robber back in the early 1900s who was asked, why do you rob banks? And he looked at him incredulously and said, well, that's where the money is. And so I say good companies have a single-minded obsession with following the money, and that's what Nike does really well. The story is a friend of mine who was an ex-speed skater, and he tells the story when he was training for the Olympics. And back then, they didn't have the big sponsorship contracts, so they went to the University of Alberta to train. And this is an individual, again, trying to get to the Olympics. They get up early in the morning, use the gym, work out. Many of them had day jobs, and they come back at night. And at night, they go and do the rest of their training. By about 9:30, 10, the gym doors closed at 10, they all were at various stages of getting showered and dressed. And one day he came out of the shower, nothing but a towel wrapped around him, and came out around the corner of the shower. And then when he looked out in the main part of the locker room, there were a bunch of guys huddled around another guy in the middle. Now, if anyone has ever spent time in a men's locker room, that's not a common sight. And, he tiptoed up and kind of cautiously said, hey, guys, what's up? And it turns out there's a guy in the middle holding up a drawstring bag, and they all looked at this thing and they busted a gut laughing. They couldn't believe this person was going to put this pair of shoes, these funny-looking pair of Nikes, it turned out, on his feet. And the thing about a pair of Nikes at the time is they were different in a number of ways. One, they had the waffle sole, so the first real shock absorbent. So if you put a lot of miles, like if you're training for the Olympics, you put a lot of miles on your feet running, you worry about things like stress fractures, shin splints, knee problems, and the like. And so they absorb shock pretty well. And if anyone saw the CNBC story on Nike, they had a show about an hour long on them, and the guy who invented the waffle sole tells a story where, and it's kind of funny because he brought his wife's waffle irons, the way he tells the story, to work and created them. And his wife was so mad at him the next day because he ruined her good waffle iron. And the rest is history. Now, the other thing they were is the leading shoe manufacturers at the time were made either out of canvas, Converse, or leather, Adidas and Puma. And so these were the first synthetic nylon mass-produced shoes in the marketplace. So they looked all flimsy. And these athletes who were training for the Olympics couldn't believe that he was going to trust his valuable feet to these funny-looking, flimsy shoes. Long story short, they put a couple months go by, they saw him out in the track, and he's still wearing these funny-looking things. So what they asked him is, this is the third or fourth pair you've been through? You still wearing these funny things? Turns out that it was his first pair still. And he said, they're great. They breathe. They don't gunk up in the rain. They're light on my feet. They still absorb the shock months later. And before you knew it, this group of premier athletes in northwestern Canada were all wearing a pair of Nikes. And the Nike's not stupid. They know the money isn't in the premier athletes. The money is in the mass market, all of us.
Yeah.
So Nike became on the international scene. It was the Olympics in Montreal, the Summer Olympics. There was a long-distance runner by the name of Lassie Viren, who won the first runner in 40 years to win the long-distance double. Historic event. Every media in the coverage in the planet, every newscast that evening was watching Lassie Viren, who was given the opportunity to do a victory lap backwards on the track in Olympic Stadium in Montreal. And so what did he do? Well, he trained at home without shoes. And so what he did is he put the shoes, the Nikes, these funny-looking things, on his hands when he did the victory lap, with everyone in the world watching this historic event. And so Nike essentially the next day had more orders than to possibly can fill. Every amateur athlete in the world wanted to wear a thing, these funny-looking shoes called Nike on his or her feet. Nike was born. It's called the beachhead strategy. They used those pockets of premier athletes to sell shoes throughout the world. They did the same thing in golf with Tiger Woods, in basketball with Michael Jordan. Now, the reason why I think this story is important, as the viewers out there think about what beachhead do you want to focus on to maintain in the wake of changes like Amazon in the marketplace, is you got to be real careful who you choose as your beachhead or your flagship company. So the example by contrast is Reebok. Reebok was even more successful in their initial beachhead. And some of you may think about, who was Reebok's original beachhead? Well, they originally came into the market, if you may remember, focusing on women's aerobics. And they were huge. It was almost like a uniform. If you went to aerobics class, you had to wear a pair of Reeboks. The problem with Reebok as an initial beachhead using women's aerobics is you not only cut off half the market, but you cut off most of the market. If you're 16 or 17 years old, the last thing you want to be caught dead in is what your mom wears to her aerobics class. So you cut off the entire market by your choice of beachhead. So choosing that flagship, choosing the customer you want to focus in on, choosing the customer segment that you want to defend almost to the death when a company like Amazon comes in is crucial. Are you going to choose like Reebok, that customer that, although it gives you that business, essentially walls you off from the mass that you want to get after? Or is it the choice of a Nike-type customer where, because you maintain that flagship, it becomes all the more difficult for a company like Amazon to come in and beat you at your own game with lower cost structure, et cetera?
Well,
long-winded story, but hopefully that illustrates some of the key points.
I think it does. Thank you, man. Hey, and I don't know if this is a good, fair question, but I'll ask it. Any quick thoughts relative to, and for us distributors that are on the line here, relative to what would you recommend are the 1, 2, or 3 thoughts for us as we consider identifying who our beachhead customer might be?
So I will go to a second concept that is actually the subject of the second book I'm writing. It's one I push really hard with companies that engage me to work with them, and that is focus in on, as you think about those key customers, make sure they're a key part of the value chain that develop or give you the ability to develop what I refer to as strategic control points. And I know, Dirk, you've heard me talk about this before, and I'll illustrate that one through another example of a company that did this. And I've used it in distribution with chemical companies out there. I've done it in distribution with companies that are focused on technology products, and it's an extremely effective tool in many industries, but you need to make sure you identify what they are in your industry, and it is crucial to keep larger competitors out. So I'll do it by example.
And that's the thought of, Bill, I'm sorry, and that's the thought of strategic control, is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Yep.
So I'll illustrate the point of what is a strategic control point with a real quick example. It's a true one. It illustrates it succinctly, and that's the example of SoftSoap. So SoftSoap is we all know the brand. Most of us do, certainly. We all know liquid soap where we wash our hands. But before SoftSoap came into the market, we all washed our hands using bar soap. And they had the idea for a liquid soap product that is much like we use today with the pump. And the little bottle that takes soap and we wash our hands or face, whatever we use with it. Well, the problem they had, it was a small little company called the Minnetonka Corporation out of Minnesota. And for a small company trying to get a successful national product, the problem they have is distribution, particular shelf space allocation. So getting it onto the shelves of the supermarket first by paying either failure fees, sliding allowances, or whatever it may be to get those terms. They also have to defend the big guys once they want to imitate them. So even if they got on the shelf and got the distribution, if they were successful, would face the big guys coming in, the big competitors a week or two, a month or two, shortly down the road, with the same product and being more successful with better advertising, better size, better scale, better scope, and being able to offer better terms in the retailers. So what they did is they decided if we had 8 months, give us 6 to 8 months. And in those 8 months, if we were able to keep the big players out of the market so we can get that distribution, the shelf space allocation, so that we can build up brand awareness on the part of our customers, even if the big players came in later, we probably can maintain, you know, a good 35, 40% of the market, even with the big players in, with an 8-month window. Yep. The question they had is, how can we control the market and keep the big players out for 6 to 8 months? The solution? To buy up the world's supply of pumps.
That's brilliant. It's brilliant.
And so by buying the pumps, the big players had to build a factory to build pumps before they could actually enter the market. And it turns out that took 8 to 10 months. And so they were able to get the shelf space allocation. They built the product to what we know today. And actually a couple of years later, they sold the business to Colgate-Palmolive for a couple $2 billion. And the only way they were able to ever make that happen is realize that the point of strategic control in this market were pumps. And so I throw the question out to anyone listening out there is that in your markets, if you think about those key beachhead customers, those key customers you want to make sure you fight to the death to maintain, what are the points of strategic control so that once you maintain that, it becomes really difficult for a supplier to come in?
Yeah, great question. Thanks, Bill. You know, I loved what you said in the book relative to this, and you know, everybody sees it up on the screen, but you talk about how amazing it is that you see companies who are working effectively, doing what they do very, very effectively in their market space. Here you go, without realizing that all the work is fruitless, and that no matter how well we are competing, doing what we do so effectively, that we're doing it in vain, and because someone else could come in and squeeze their margins through the owner of strategic control points.
Yeah, and Dirk, it's actually, to me, the saddest thing I see when I see especially small businesses and those that are family-owned businesses have been around for a really long time, and you get someone who maybe has an IT solution or some way to back order in inventory and make it so that the inventory system is integrated in a way that a smaller player may not be able to do on a bigger scope and scale. And it pains me to see it because in many cases, all that needs to be done is taking a step back, and as you said before, fighting the tyranny of the urgency, stopping with the inbox just for a couple of days and walking away and saying, okay, where is the business going? What are those trends that if we don't stay ahead of, someone will look back like happened in magazine publishing and people say, what were we thinking? The example I often throw out is a classic one. Rockefeller, back at the turn of the century in the Industrial Revolution, tried vehemently to stop Edison's electric light bulb from being popular because it cut into his kerosene business. It wasn't going to be successful now, no matter how hard he tried. We're not going to stop the tide of electric light. And so in many of your businesses, sometimes we're not going to stop those bigger trends. But if we can be ahead of the game and try and understand what those points are that we can take advantage of, either through the beachheads and the key customers that we can integrate into, and those one or two key customers can be that point of light will represent the business forward, those points of strategic control that give us the ability to keep the big players out until which point we could actually get those advantages in the market that will keep us in business and become the players that actually not only compete with Amazon, but provide the local alternatives, the better service, the better understanding, the better needs met for our customers by walking in their shoes. And sometimes all we need is that time to overcome it because we actually do genuinely do a better job meeting those customer needs because we understand our customers in the way bigger players such as Amazon can't.
Yeah, without question. That's very cool. You know, you talk about the need to really step back and look at where the business is going, right? Mm-hmm. And, you know, I call that peering. You know, we need to find that time to peer into the future. And as we started this conversation, you know, we talked about, you know, my belief that we live in this age of disruption. We have all these things coming at us. It's technology, it's government regulations, it's competition, it's non-traditional competition. And we really need to do what you just said. You know, if we're going to compete smarter, we need to, quote unquote, peer into the future and see where the business is going in the future. I know one of the things that you talk about, maybe we can start bringing this to conclusion, Bill, with time and all that, but you talk about the need to stay one step ahead. And I know that you've used these two diagrams to help us think through how we can actually stay one step ahead, find out where the business is going, and then to make these strategic steps and provide the strategic setting for the future. Could you just walk us through your thought process here, if you don't mind?
Yeah, so we call it right to left rather than left to right thinking, because we think about where we want to be and then work back from that rather than where we are and how we make incremental changes. One of the biggest problems, one of the biggest reasons why when we think about incremental, the diagram on the left, the what we call left to right thinking, and just thinking where we are and making changes, is many companies have what I call an addiction problem. And we often example a Blockbuster who they didn't recognize Netflix as a competitor, and they ended up getting knocked out of the market because of in declaring bankruptcy, because people had better solutions. And one of the reasons for that was that Blockbuster had the physical assets of the physical locations. And they thought about how do we transition physical infrastructure into something that's going on in the market. People are moving to DVDs, instant downloads, and the like, and they just were too slow because they were trying to protect that existing infrastructure. And so in many ways, if we start to think about where the market is going to be rather than what we need to do to change our current environment by stepping back from the market, it gives the ability to work back, and we recognize sometimes radical changes that we need to make. Having physical infrastructure, trucks, warehouses, real estate, physical locations, and Blockbuster's example was an inventory of DVDs, limits our ability to make the changes that are necessary that those that are unencumbered by those physical assets don't have to overcome. And quite often the disruption in industries come because of that. The quote I love to hold up is, if you think of Apple, and they're almost cliched, we talk about them all the time, but in the spring of 2007, they were being held up as a darling of the tech world. They had iTunes and iPod. That was, Steve Jobs was a hero. It was brilliant. What did they do? They threw at least the iPod part of the business away. They literally, intentionally threw it away and disrupted it themselves. Who needs an iPod anymore? We have it built into our iPhone. And so what they did, if you think about it, in 80% of the worldwide revenue of Apple last quarter, 80% comes from products that didn't even exist in the spring of 2007. 80%. And so the question I'll throw out to everyone out there is, we try and think about the existing capital assets we have, the physical infrastructure, and how do we adopt it when competition comes in. And I argue that's exactly the wrong approach. It's backwards. We need to think about where the market is going to be and what steps do we need to take from today to get to where the market is going. And sometimes it's divesting those physical assets as quickly as possible. Sometimes it's changing a model like GE did in its transportation division when they went to a power-by-hour solution for locomotives rather than physically selling the locomotives. Creative solutions, I'd argue, only come from when we throw out our existing model, think about where we need to be, and of course we need to figure out how we need to get from where we are to where we need to be, which requires taking into account our existing business model, but we need to start from scratch if we're going to decide how we get from where we are to where we're going to be, rather than think about how we need to change where we are. And good companies do that.
I love it. I love it, Bill. We are all, every one of us on the call right now, we're saddled, I don't know if that's a good word, but we're saddled with the infrastructure of resources, of manpower, of branches, of brick and mortar, whatever it has, equipment, technology platforms. We're saddled with that. And having built it for our business today and maybe of yesterday. And what I hear you saying is, too often that infrastructure, if you will, drives us to legacy thinking, drives us to, right? And what I'm really taking from you here is we need to flip that around. Let's step away from the business, if you will. Let's truly commit to competing smarter, not harder. Let's peer into that future, and let's work backwards from there. And I think it's brilliant. I think it's brilliant, and I think it's timely, Bill. and I think your thoughts are right on for everybody in this business. Thank you very much.
Dirk, I love what you said about stepping back from things, and it's hard to do, but it's something that is crucial, as we all know, right?
You bet. You bet. You know, Mike, as I turn it back over to you, and Bill, if you've got any final thoughts, you know, I think, Mike, what you're doing right now with this advanced executive leadership program is critical. With this age of disruption that we're living in, you know, and with the industry talk that's going on that I started with this about 40 minutes ago. Again, I believe this type of talk is dangerous. I believe it's alarming. I believe that it drives us to complacency. It allows for the tyranny of the urgent. And I prefer to take a look at it like this. I think every one of us in distribution today, and I'll just use Amazon Supply as one example, but there's others, right? With all the disruptions that are taking place, everybody walking in, I believe right now we are competing against the boldest guys on the planet. I mean, look at the stated goal of Amazon Supply. It's to supply everything needed to rebuild civilization. We're competing against the boldest guys on the planet. We haven't had to do that in the past. I also believe we are competing against the smartest guys on the planet. We all know about their drones from 60 Minutes, but a less known thing is what they call anticipatory shipping, where they've got algorithms and they're talking about shipping packages before we actually order it. We're competing today against the smartest guys on the planet. And I think we're also competing against the most relentless guys on the planet. They are not in a lifestyle business. Bezos is not managing this for his lifestyle. He's got 5 to 7 years horizons for his investments to pay off, and these guys are relentless. So again, I believe today we have to be competing smarter and not harder. And innovation is a key component part of that. And that's why I'm thrilled, Mike, that we are partnering with you in your Advanced Executive Leadership Program to help all of us as members of ASA think differently, bring innovation and a culture of innovation, step away from the tyranny of the urgent, to bring these ideas from people outside of the industry like Bill. You know, Bill and Mike, one of the I'm a huge Steve Jobs fan, and what I believe, one of his quotes was this. He says, go out and find the best that humans have done, not the best that other distributors have done. Go out and find the best that humans have done, and then try to bring that into your business. And I know, Mike, that's, again, what you're doing here with the Advanced Executive Leadership Program. That's what we're doing with Unleash WD. And Bill, one last time, thank you for the insights you've brought to us. And I know that everybody here can go and get your book. They can follow you with your blog, your company website. It's all up there on the screen for us all. So, Bill, as always, thank you for helping us learn and think about competing smarter, not harder. I really appreciate it, Bill. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, Dirk. And I'll make a plug in for the WD Unleash. It is amazing. It is exciting. It is something that I learned a lot from, and encourage everyone out there to be there. It's well worth the time and effort.
Appreciate that, Bill.
Dirk and Bill, on behalf of ASA, thank you very much for joining us today. Those of you that are participating, thank you for joining. You know, ASA, you know, our goal, one of our strategic goals is that our members, employees will be the best trained, most professional. Our commitment is to make sure that our CEOs remain relevant well into the future, and that means offering you guys some thought-provoking content so that you remain relevant in the future. So this is a super start. Thank you again, guys, for doing this. We'd like to hear from you all on topics that you may be thinking about, so that as we move forward into next year and developing additional content, we hit what you're looking for. The next session is on June 26th on lean warehousing. And again, thank you both. It's a great topic, very thought-provoking and futuristic that we need to be thinking about, so that we don't go by the wayside of the blockbusters into the future. So thank you all, and this is a wrap. So thank you all again.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
everyone.
everybody.
Take care.
Thanks.
Bye.